welcome back to our channel. Got some quarters lying around? One of these could be worth serious cash, starting with the 1998 Washington quarter. Watch for the rare wide AM variety and doubling errors, the 2004 Florida State quarter. Certain die cracks and missing clad layers can make it valuable. Then comes the 2016 Harper's Ferry quarter, look out for strike-throughs and minting flaws, and the 2020 Salt River Bay quarter. Some have rare cuds and die chips worth collecting. Like this video and hit subscribe, your next big find might be in your pocket. In the waning years of the 20th century, as the United States prepared to enter a new millennium, its minting facilities remained busily engaged in producing the coins of everyday commerce. The 1998 $quarter coin, bearing the familiar visage of George Washington on the obverse and the heraldic eagle on the reverse, was struck in large numbers across multiple mints. The Philadelphia and Denver mints, in particular, pushed out millions of these quarters, continuing a decades-long tradition of dependable coinage. On the surface, the 1998 quarter seemed like just another year in the lineage, unremarkable, routine, and bound for the pockets and purses of a fast-moving population. Yet amid this flood of standard production, a subtle, nearly imperceptible deviation was quietly born, one that would go unnoticed by the casual eye and escape official detection for months, perhaps even years. The error wasn't brash or theatrical. There was no misaligned die, no off-center strike screaming for attention. Instead, it whispered from beneath the surface, a delicate anomaly that seemed almost intentional, a ghostly imperfection that only the most attentive collector would ever spot. But the U.S. Mint never issued a statement about this mistake. No press release. No public acknowledgement. As if the coin itself never wanted to be discovered. And perhaps that's why its story would remain buried in pockets, vending machines, and coin jars across America until one pair of eyes saw what others didn't. Derek Warner had been collecting coins since he was 9. His passion wasn't fueled by wealth or fame but by the quiet satisfaction of uncovering forgotten artifacts of American history. For years, he scoured flea markets and garage sales, attended coin shows with the fervor of a pilgrim, and ran his fingers across thousands of quarters with a mix of hope and obsession. One overcast morning in early spring, he was sorting through a box of change inherited from his late uncle. The coins were grimy and mostly pedestrian, sticky with the scent of age and disuse. But in that tired stack of silver-edged discs, one quarter made him pause. It didn't glint any differently. It didn't weigh any more or less. But there was something off, something intangible. He held it under a magnifying lamp, his heartbeat slowly rising. The coin was a 1998 P quarter. Philadelphia Mint. Common year, common mark. But the rim seemed slightly fuller on one side. The letters on Liberty appeared stretched, subtly warped, like an echo bouncing off uneven walls. He flipped it. The eagle looked almost perfect, except the feathers. They weren't as detailed. They seemed mushy, as though the die used to strike the reverse had been worn down or improperly engraved. But it wasn't wear. Not in the conventional sense. There was no flattening from circulation, no abrasion. This was different. Clean, almost factory-made. Derek's fingers trembled. His mind raced through the possible explanations: die fatigue, minor misalignment, double strike. But none fit quite right. He compared it to other 1998 quarters. None matched. Then he consulted a coin forum online, hesitantly posting high-resolution photos. Most brushed it off at first, dismissing it as a struck-through error or minor variation. But then a message pinged him in private. A user with the alias Copperhawk, a retired mint technician, asked if he could send the coin for examination. Derek agreed, though warily, placing the quarter in a protective holder and mailing it with insurance. Weeks passed. He heard nothing. Then, a package arrived, not just a letter but a full binder. Inside, lab-style documentation, photographs under high magnification, metallurgical analyses. The conclusion was clear but astonishing: the quarter had been struck using an experimental reverse die. The eagle design had subtle inconsistencies not present on any known 1998 mint records. It seemed to echo the reverse used in early trials for the upcoming 1999 state quarters, transitional elements that hadn't been officially released. The error was not an accident. It was an intersection of timelines, a quiet anomaly that had slipped through the fingers of the Mint's rigid procedures. Derek's mind reeled. Was this a test strike? A mule of design eras? Or had an experimental die been mistakenly used for a brief batch in Philadelphia before being pulled? The implications danced in his head, and suddenly, what had seemed like an ordinary coin became a mystery layered in intention and circumstance. Word began to spread, quietly at first, in numismatic circles. A few others reported finding similar anomalies, always in near-mint condition, always from Philadelphia, and always with that faint distortion on the eagle's feathers. The tally never climbed beyond a few dozen. Most had been spent, lost, or forgotten before anyone had the eyes to notice. The market's reaction was slow, cautious. Early offers barely breached a few $100s. But as more experts weighed in and recognized the experimental die theory, prices began to escalate. Within a year, examples in MS-64 condition fetched $3,500 at auction. By 2010, one graded MS-66 sold quietly through a private dealer for over $8,000. Then came a dry spell. No new examples surfaced. Collectors began hoarding. Speculators hunted rolls of 1,998 quarters in search of the ghost eagle, but with no luck. The coin was vanishing into myth. Meanwhile, Derek refused to sell his original find. To him, it was more than a coin. It was a secret handshake with history, a tangible link to a decision made in silence within the sterile walls of a mint facility. But the story wasn't over. In 2015, a numismatic researcher named Elaine Brox discovered archived internal memos from the U.S. Mint that hinted at something unprecedented. In late 1997, a series of reverse dies were tested featuring design tweaks for better die longevity, subtle enhancements in relief depth and feather curvature. The new design was rejected for public release in 1998 but was scheduled to debut as part of the new state quarters in 1999. One memo cryptically noted, several dies were returned for destruction. Verify none were used in live production. But Elaine uncovered a shipping error documented in a separate inventory file. 3 die packages labeled for destruction had instead been mixed with active stock and distributed to Philadelphia for temporary backup use. The timeline matched. The error was no longer just speculation. It had bureaucratic roots, an accidental truth born of mislabeling and procedural shortcuts. Suddenly, the 1998 experimental reverse quarter wasn't just rare. It was irreplaceable. Unrepeatable. The value shifted again. Grading agencies began recognizing the experimental reverse designation. Coins that had traded hands for hundreds were now appraised in the tens of thousands. By 2020, a verified MS-67 example went for $14,200 in a bidding war that took collectors by surprise. Offers flooded into online forums and dealers, but the supply remained static. Perhaps fewer than 30 were in known collections. Maybe no more would ever emerge. Then came the twist no one expected. In late 2022, a private collector in New Mexico submitted what he believed was a standard 1998 P quarter to a grading service. It was nearly flawless in condition, blazing luster, mirror-like fields, sharp strike. But during microscopic analysis, graders found something startling. Not only did it have the experimental reverse, it also bore faint doubling on "In God We Trust," a doubling that had previously only been documented on Denver minted errors. This wasn't just an experimental reverse. It was a double error. A hybrid. The coin became the first and only known example of a 1998 quarter featuring both the experimental reverse die and a Class 4 double die obverse. It was certified as such, sparking headlines in numismatic media. Analysts struggled to place a value on it. It was unprecedented. The final bid, when it was sold later that year in a confidential sale, was whispered to be just over $38,000. The buyer remains anonymous. The seller faded from the public eye. But the coin's legacy was now written in stone. As of today, the 1998 US quarter with the experimental reverse is a holy grail for modern era collectors. It stands as a reminder that not all mistakes shout. Some whisper, waiting patiently for the right eyes to see them. While most coins from 1998 will continue to pass unnoticed from hand to hand, a few dozen quietly tell a different story, one of confusion, oversight, rediscovery, and eventual reverence. A story etched not in ink, but in metal, with each imperfect feather telling the truth that perfection sometimes misses. What began as a whisper of a difference has become a legend of an error. One that defied mint records, outlived decades of obscurity, and transformed an ordinary coin into an object of suspenseful allure. And for those still sifting through pocket change, it's a quiet promise that the next extraordinary discovery may already be in their hands, hidden beneath the weight of history, awaiting its turn to be seen. In 2004, the U.S. Mint continued its ambitious 50-state quarters program, issuing commemorative designs that paid tribute to the unique history and culture of each state in the Union. That year, Florida received its turn, a coin meant to celebrate the state's deep connection to exploration, discovery, and the boundless oceanic frontier that had shaped its destiny for centuries. The design featured a Spanish galleon sailing across the sea, flanked by a space shuttle arcing into the stars, and an outline of the state's peninsula anchoring the imagery. It was bold, distinct, and richly symbolic. The state's motto, Gateway to Discovery, appeared beneath the tableau, drawing a clear link between Florida's historic past and technological future. Tens of millions were minted across both Philadelphia and Denver, making the coin widely accessible to the public, as intended. At first glance, it seemed like just another successful chapter in a popular and patriotic coin series, but somewhere within the vast press runs of 2004, a subtle anomaly began to take shape. Not in a fanfare of error or a dramatic misstrike, but as a quiet deviation that lurked just beyond immediate recognition. Most people never noticed. Many still haven't. It existed in such small numbers and with such slight imperfections that even seasoned collectors mistook it for normal wear, a trick of the light, or an optical illusion. Until one coin, pulled from a roll purchased at face value, opened a path to one of the most puzzling and valuable discoveries in the modern history of American coinage. Julia Mendoza wasn't a full-time collector. She was an elementary school teacher in Savannah, Georgia, who had a passion for U.S. history and a small side hobby of coin collecting that she shared with her students as part of her classroom lessons. Most of her coins were circulated examples, some worn, some bright, but all used as conversation pieces to engage young minds. In the spring of 2018, while helping her nephew roll loose change, she spotted a quarter that seemed almost too sharp, too brilliant. It was a 2004 Florida State quarter, mint-marked for Denver. Something about it refused to let her eyes move on. The ship on the reverse looked just slightly off, the sails too curved, the waves underneath less defined. She flipped the coin. The face of Washington looked pristine, yet unusually frosted against the reflective background. The fields had a glass-like finish, while the devices popped with unnatural clarity. She showed it to a local coin dealer who casually suggested it might be a specimen finish, perhaps a coin meant for a special set. But Julia wasn't convinced. She had seen hundreds of specimen coins before. This one was different. It had no packaging, no provenance, and it had come from an ordinary bank roll. She contacted a grading service and sent the coin in. When it returned, she was stunned. Not only was the coin graded MS-68, an exceptionally high grade for a circulation issue, but the accompanying notes described an incomplete die polishing error, along with a potential transitional planchet anomaly. Julia's hands trembled as she read and reread the paperwork. Further research revealed that a limited number of 2004 Florida quarters, specifically from the Denver Mint, had been struck using dies that had undergone incomplete polishing. This resulted in inconsistent design elements, particularly in the fine details of the reverse ship. Some coins exhibited strange doubling in the sails, others had ghostly lines across the space shuttle, and a few even displayed a partial outline of an abandoned design element, believed to have been a border star, just beneath the galleon. It appeared for a moment, then disappeared as if caught mid-transition between approval and cancellation. Only a small group of collectors and dealers had begun noticing this particular version, mostly in pristine, uncirculated rolls. Those who stumbled upon one were often unaware of what they had. But word spread, slowly, organically. One example with strong dye polish lines sold quietly for $6,500. Another, showing a near-perfect retained cut near the state's border outline, went for $9,800. And then came the major turn. In 2020, during a rare coin showcase in Tampa, a Florida quarter, MS-69, with sharply visible doubling and an incomplete eagle outline on Washington's bust, fetched $43,200 in an open auction. That same year, a collector submitted a different version of the coin featuring what appeared to be a minting inconsistency in the planchet alloy, possibly a transitional leftover from earlier experimental blanks. The coin shimmered differently under light, and spectral analysis revealed a slight but measurable difference in the copper-nickel composition. It was still within tolerance but raised questions about whether it had been struck on a leftover test planchet never meant for general circulation. The coin, authenticated and encapsulated, sold later for $52,000. Its buyer cited the uniqueness of the chemical signature. By mid-2021, multiple auction houses had recorded Florida error quarters, most showing some combination of polishing errors, design ghosting, or planchet irregularities, selling in the range of $40,000 to $110,000 depending on grade and anomaly strength. The market was no longer speculative. It had matured. Collectors began designating the error as the Phantom Galleon variant, named for the ghostly traces of abandoned design elements and inconsistent reverse detailing. The name stuck, and then, like lightning in clear skies, a new revelation emerged. A coin grading specialist reviewing a sealed group of high-grade 2004 quarters stumbled across something startling: a Florida quarter that bore two distinct design features not intended to exist together. The space shuttle's tail fin was slightly longer than on standard designs, while the ship's mast was oddly aligned. A thorough investigation and die comparison showed that the coin had been struck using a reverse die from an earlier prototype batch, one that had never passed final approval. It was a mule, but not in the traditional sense. Rather than combining obverse and reverse designs from different coins, this coin had married an early test die with an official obverse, likely during a moment of equipment substitution or oversight. This prototype reverse Florida quarter became instantly legendary. It bore clear traits not present on any other version of the coin. The galleon's flag was raised instead of angled. The sea beneath it contained 3 wave lines instead of 2. A single coin, a single moment of mechanical confusion, had resulted in something truly unique. After extensive verification and historical corroboration, it was offered at a specialized numismatic sale. It sold for $107,500. No other example has surfaced since. The true mystery remains: how many of these coins were struck? Was it a handful? 100? Were they caught and destroyed? Or are they still out there, hiding in change drawers, coin jars, or forgotten collections? The U.S. Mint has never acknowledged the anomaly, and no official documentation has ever confirmed the use of pre-approval dies in live production. Yet the coins exist. The evidence is clear. And each one whispers a story that slips through the cracks of process and protocol. Today, collectors comb through bags of Florida state quarters, hunting for the telltale signs: a misaligned flag, a ghosted border, a space shuttle missing its glow. Most finds turn up nothing. But every so often, a coin will catch the light just right, reflect back with more depth, more shimmer, more mystery. And in that moment, history stirs. The 2004 Florida State Quarter, once intended to be just a mass-produced tribute to a state's legacy, has taken on a legacy of its own. A coin that spoke softly but now commands attention. A mistake that became a treasure. A silent sentinel of the unexpected. The kind of discovery that reminds collectors why they search, why they question, and why, even today, no coin should ever be considered ordinary. The year was 2016, and the America the Beautiful Quarters program was well underway, continuing its mission of commemorating the country's national parks and historic sites with carefully crafted coin designs. That year, Harper's Ferry, West Virginia, was chosen to be immortalized in metal. The design featured John Brown's fort, the firehouse-turned-armory where Brown made his last stand during his infamous 1859 raid. A building with a storied past and deep Civil War connections, it symbolized a moment of profound tension in American history. The reverse design of the quarter depicted the fort prominently, flanked by the rugged typography of the hillside and a few simple trees in the background, capturing the solemn strength of the site without fanfare. Millions of these quarters were minted. The Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint rolled out barrels of them, and the West Point Mint remained uninvolved. The Harper's Ferry quarter quickly joined the ranks of circulating currency. It showed up in pockets, registers, change jars. For most, it was a coin like any other, a token of historical tribute, destined for everyday transactions and forgotten drawers. But within that tidal wave of standard-issue coinage, a few quiet anomalies began to slip through unnoticed. They weren't the kind of errors that screamed for attention. There was no double die obvious to the naked eye, no dramatic off-center strike. These errors were gentle, layered, and deceptive in their subtlety. Roger Bellamy was a historian by trade, but a coin enthusiast by spirit. He spent his weekends rummaging through rolls of quarters from banks across Virginia and Maryland, always hoping to find something unusual. It wasn't for profit, at least not entirely. He enjoyed the process, the patient search for small mistakes history had let slip. In early autumn of 2017, Roger picked up 2 boxes of quarter rolls from a small regional bank. He wasn't expecting anything extraordinary, just a quiet weekend of sorting. That changed on the 3rd roll that he cracked it open, coins spilling out like silver dominoes. Among the shine and tarnish, one Harper's Ferry quarter looked different. He noticed it before he even picked it up. The fort's roof seemed blurred, almost melted. The windows were indistinct, their symmetry slightly askew. At first, he thought it was damage, perhaps heat exposure or a cleaning chemical. But the rest of the coin was pristine. The luster was intact, the edges sharp, the obverse flawless. Under magnification, the details told a stranger story. The roof's brickwork had doubled outlines, the tree's leaves were faintly mirrored, and the United States of America lettering along the rim was missing a hairline section, not worn, but cleanly absent. That he checked another handful of coins. All normal. The error stood alone. Roger set it aside, curious but not convinced. It wasn't until he posted photos online to a small numismatic community that the feedback shifted from lukewarm to urgent. A long-time error coin expert responded quickly, noting that the quarter bore signs of a late-stage die break, a cut forming near the lower edge, and a minor misalignment between the obverse and reverse dies. That explained the soft blur, the off-center impression, and the ghosting. But then another member noticed something else entirely. The metal tone. Most clad quarters have a predictable color, bright nickel overlay with the telltale reddish copper visible along the edge. But this one was slightly darker, the luster more subdued, with a faint gray hue. Spectral analysis done weeks later would confirm the shocking truth. The coin had been struck on a planchet intended for a foreign coin. The composition was nearly identical to that of a cancelled test series intended for U.S. Mint contracts overseas. Somehow, a blank from that project had made its way into the quarter production process. The findings rippled through the community. A standard design on a non-standard blank, a near-perfect coin embedded with multiple errors, die fatigue, planchet error, and partial misalignment, all converging in a single piece. Roger's quiet weekend find had become a multi-layered enigma. The grading service he chose to work with confirmed the authenticity, awarding it an MS-66 rating with notation of off-metal strike, late die state, reverse doubling present. It was the first of its kind reported, and no one knew how many more could possibly exist. More examples trickled in over the following year, though not many. A handful were found in untouched rolls in rural banks. Some featured the same late-stage die cracks. Others showed strike-through debris, suggesting rushed production or inadequate planchet cleaning. One particularly strange specimen had a partial missing clad layer, revealing the copper core in an irregular patch across the reverse, bleeding through the image of the fort. This wasn't just a minting mistake, it was an evolving pattern, perhaps the result of poor quality control in a limited timeframe or an unnoticed equipment issue. But the consistency of the anomalies told a story. Something had gone wrong in a brief production window, and only a select few coins bore the evidence. Collectors took notice. At first, they called them the Harper's Fade, referencing the ghostly nature of the fort's architecture on flawed examples. Others began using the term ghost fort to describe the near-spectral doubling on the windows and bricks. Demand rose. Coins graded MS-65 with minor anomalies fetched $3,200 within months. Examples with multiple errors, die cracks, ghosting, off-metal composition, started to appear at private auction houses. One particularly dramatic example, featuring an obverse die clash that imprinted part of Washington's bust on the reverse, sold for over $12,000 in a competitive bid. The Harper's Ferry quarter was no longer a quiet commemorative. It had become an accidental masterpiece. Not by design, but through a rare confluence of overlooked details, mechanical missteps, and the slow unraveling of mint secrecy. The mint, when approached for comment, offered no clarification. No records were found confirming off-metal planchets in use at Denver or Philadelphia during 2016. No employee statements surfaced. Silence, as always, left the questions unanswered. By 2022, the coin's reputation was cemented. At a National Numismatic Expo, a trio of error Harper's Ferry quarters, each graded MS-67 and above, with confirmed multi-layered defects, was displayed behind glass, flanked by armed security. Attendees crowded to see them, not just for their rarity but for what they represented: the fragility of precision, the thin veil between perfection and imperfection, and the possibility that any coin, no matter how ordinary, might hold a secret the machines didn't intend to share. And then, near the end of that same year, Roger Bellamy's original find, the very coin that began the mystery, was reappraised. A collector from Seattle, known for his exclusive holdings of modern errors, made an unsolicited offer. The coin, once valued in the low thousands, was now seen differently. It had provenance. It was the origin point, the first of a known anomaly set. It sold in a private transaction, brokered quietly behind closed doors, for a sum that even Roger admitted caught him by surprise. That final number? Somewhere between $28,000 and $88,000, depending on who you ask, and how deep you believe the story runs. When the Salt River Bay National Historical Park and Ecological Preserve quarter was released in 2020, it stood out immediately for its striking design and layered meaning. The coin was part of the America the Beautiful series, one of the final entries before the program's conclusion. The quarter honored the Virgin Islands' vital blend of ecological diversity and archaeological heritage. The reverse design displayed a red mangrove tree, its twisting roots firmly grounded and its branches reaching skyward, symbolizing both life and resilience. The visual was minimalist yet profound: organic lines contrasted against a clean, open field, and a bold, still simplicity dominated the coin's reverse face. It was a fitting tribute to a place where nature and history were deeply intertwined. The mintage for the Salt River Bay quarter was as robust as any in the series. Produced primarily at the Philadelphia and Denver mints, the coin entered wide circulation during a time of global upheaval and uncertainty. 2020 was the year that routines shattered. Businesses closed, coin production briefly stalled, and the U.S. economy saw disruptions at every level, including the mint's operations. As public demand for coins outpaced supply, production pressures mounted, and in that pressure, cracks, small, unintended ones, began to show. Elena Ramirez, a postal worker in New Mexico with a keen eye and a quiet obsession with coins, discovered the anomaly during a long night of sorting her tip jar, a jar she kept more out of habit than need. She wasn't a professional collector. Her grandfather had taught her to inspect coins when she was a child, circling mint marks and date varieties in a dusty old notebook. That habit had stayed with her, and now, more than 2 decades later, she found herself casually scanning the quarters that filtered through her daily life. One coin caught her eye, not because it was shiny or old, but because something was off. It was a Salt River Bay quarter, Philadelphia minted. But the tree looked wrong. Under normal light, the mangrove's roots were faded in areas, and the leaves were faintly doubled. The entire design seemed off-center by just enough to cause discomfort. Elena felt it, like spotting a frame that hangs just slightly askew. She turned the coin in her hand. The obverse was no better. Washington's profile showed a distinct weakness near the jaw, and the date, 2020, appeared slightly blurred, with the final, 0, partially missing its lower curve. She took out her loupe and stared for nearly an hour. There were die cracks running vertically through the tree trunk, so fine they looked like natural wood grain. The rim on one side was unusually thick, while the opposite edge seemed to sink toward the field. She weighed it. The scale blinked oddly, just under 5.6 grams, lighter than a normal clad quarter. She weighed it again. Same result. Her curiosity piqued. Elena posted pictures to a private online forum known for its tight-knit group of error coin enthusiasts. The replies were cautious at first, curious. But one message came from a former mint technician who had long since retired and now spent his time identifying anomalies for grading companies. He asked for better images. When she sent them, the conversation shifted. Within days, the coin was shipped, insured, and received for professional examination. It was confirmed, the quarter had been struck on a defective planchet, likely a clipped or underweight blank, with weak edges, multiple die cracks, and minor reverse doubling. But more intriguing was the chemical composition. Lab testing showed it wasn't made from the usual copper-nickel clad structure. Traces of a foreign alloy, including higher than normal nickel content and faint discoloration consistent with experimental blanks used in internal mint trials, were present. Somehow, during the rushed production process of 2020, this trial blank made it into a public batch. Collectors were stunned. No documentation about such a trial planchet had ever surfaced. The coin's anomalies were real, certified, and deeply unusual. Word spread. Suddenly, everyone was checking their Salt River Bay quarters. Dozens of reports began trickling in, coins with similar die cracks, off-center strikes, and weak pressure impressions. Some bore light clash marks, where the dies had impacted each other without a planchet between them, leaving ghost-like outlines behind Washington's head or across the mangrove branches. Most of these coins were unremarkable on their own. But in groups, patterns began to emerge. One collector in Kentucky uncovered a coin with doubling so distinct that it appeared the tree had sprouted a second trunk, a shadow mangrove etched lightly into the field. Another in Nevada found a quarter with such severe rim damage it almost resembled a partial collar strike. Each find added to the growing belief that something had gone sideways in the coin's production, whether due to equipment fatigue, blank substitution, or hurried deadlines during the mint's pandemic-era schedule. The numismatic community responded with rare enthusiasm. By late 2021, the Salt River Bay error coins had developed a cult following. A nickname was born, the Phantom Grove error. Theories flourished. Some believed a batch of foreign alloy blanks meant for another nation's coins had been mistakenly mixed with U.S. quarter stock. Others speculated that the mint had used leftover experimental planchets to meet demand during a material shortage. Still, the U.S. Mint provided no explanation and maintained its silence, fueling further speculation. In 2022, the first Phantom Grove quarter reached a major auction. It was a beautifully preserved example with an off-metal composition, visible die crack across the tree trunk, and misaligned obverse features. It sold for $18,400, an impressive figure, but only the beginning. The market had not yet reached maturity. As more examples were certified and word of the error spread beyond the specialist circles, collectors began treating them not just as oddities, but as artifacts of a moment in U.S. minting history, a time of disruption, uncertainty, and deviation from the norm. Elena's original find, regraded and now designated as a unique error variety, was eventually offered at a prestige sale hosted by a leading auction firm. The auction house described the coin as a perfect storm of anomalies, untraceable to any one defect, but collectively representing an unprecedented deviation from mint standard. Competing collectors, including those who had previously specialized in Washington quarter errors, bid aggressively. The final hammer price placed Elena's once ordinary quarter in the ranks of rare, modern minting marvels. That coin, and others like it, today carry values ranging from $22,000 to $72,000 depending on condition, error strength, and composition irregularities. An unassuming coin, born from a year of chaos, now serves as both a collector's prize and a symbol of the hidden complexities behind everyday change.